Hey guys, tonight we're going to plunge into a world that makes your worst day look like a holiday. You're about to be born into mud misery and medieval filth, a time when your name doesn't matter. Your opinion counts even less, and your daily goal is simply to survive. Welcome to life as a medieval peasant. And spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. I love seeing how far this sleepy little village of ours stretches. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're born on a dirt floor. Not metaphorically a real dirt floor. There's straw beneath your mother's knees, and the air is thick with smoke, sweat, and the unmistakable scent of animals that live just a few feet away. The tiny one-room cottage you're born into is made of wattle and daub with a thatched roof that leaks when it rains, and walls that do little to keep out the cold. There's no midwife. Just your mother, possibly a neighbor, and a prayer that both of you survive the delivery. Infant mortality is a casual reality. Half the children born here won't live past their 5th birthday. You arrive squalling and cold, wrapped in whatever cloth hasn't been repurposed for bandages, and you are immediately just one more mouth to feed in a world where food is already scarce. Your father, if he's not in the fields, might be there to hold you for a moment, before handing you back and heading out. There is no time to dote. He has a lord to serve, taxes to pay, and fields that will not plow themselves. Your mother, still bleeding and weak, must resume her chores within days. She may have 10 more children after you, but only a few will see adulthood. You grow up crawling through soot and dung. There are no toys, no picture books, no lullabies, unless someone remembers one. You play with sticks, stones, and sometimes bones. You mimic animals, splash in mud, and learn quickly to avoid the mean-spirited rooster. Your first words aren't mama or papa. They're more likely hot no and mine. Education is not in your future. Reading is for monks and nobility. You'll learn what you need to survive, how to fetch water from the well without falling in, how to avoid the Lord's steward, and how to work a field before you've even lost your baby teeth. Your first job might be as a bird scarer. You stand in the fields all day waving your arms and shouting to keep crows from stealing what little grain your family has managed to grow. You're 5 years old, maybe 6, and the sun is hot and merciless. If you fall asleep, you'll be beaten not just by your father, but by the reeve who enforces the Lord's rules with a stick and zero sympathy. There's no such thing as privacy. Your entire family, sometimes 3 generations, sleeps in the same room. If your parents share intimacy, they do so quietly under a thin blanket, while your back is turned because space is limited and walls are non-existent. You don't understand what's happening, not yet, but you know better than to ask. You sleep on a sack of straw. It's flattened, itchy, and filled with insects. You share it with your siblings. Blankets are a luxury. If the fire goes out in the night, and it often does, you wake up shivering, your breath visible in the air, your fingers numb. There is no chimney. Smoke rises and clings to the rafters, which are alive with spiders, rats, and the occasional nesting bird. Breakfast is cold porridge if you're lucky, sometimes stale bread soaked in water or ale. Meat. Forget it. Cheese only if the cow didn't die that week. You eat what's available: roots, cabbage, sometimes eggs. You eat with your hands or a wooden spoon if your family hasn't lost it. Your health is not a concern to anyone but your mother, and she has no remedies to offer. Doctors don't visit peasants. They serve the nobility. Your wounds are treated with moldy bread, your fevers with whispered prayers, and maybe some boiled weeds. You're taught to fear bad smells because they're believed to carry illness. You wash rarely, mostly because there's no time or clean water to spare. The concept of germs is centuries away. You'll likely die from something you can't even name. When you're old enough to walk without stumbling, you begin helping in the fields. You learn how to hoe, sow, reap, and carry heavy loads. The work is endless. The seasons dictate everything. In spring, you plant. In summer, you weed. In autumn, you harvest. In winter, you pray the food doesn't run out before spring returns. Your Lord owns you in everything but name. You're not a slave, but you can't leave, can't own land, can't hunt in the forest. If you kill a rabbit to feed your starving family, you risk your hand being chopped off. If you fish in the Lord's pond, you'll be fined more than you can pay. You are bound to the manor, and breaking that bond isn't brave. It's suicidal. The church looms large over your life. You don't understand the Latin spoken at Mass, but you know the priest's voice and the rhythm of the services. You believe in heaven because life here is hell. You're told to suffer patiently, to accept your station, to thank God for the little you have. The priest preaches that poverty is holy. Meanwhile, he wears finer robes than anyone in your village and never has dirt under his nails. Marriage is arranged. Love doesn't factor in. You marry who your parents say at whatever age makes the most economic sense. Your wedding is a handshake, a muttered vow, and perhaps a stale piece of cake if someone had flour to spare. And from that moment, your life becomes your spouse's burden and theirs yours. Children follow quickly because you need hands in the field and because there's nothing else to do after dark. Death is always nearby. It comes by fever, by accident, by childbirth, by blade. You lose a sibling to a cough, a friend to a cut that won't heal a cousin to childbirth at 14. You attend more funerals than feasts. You live with it. You don't cry as much as you should. There's simply no time. And still you endure. Because you have no choice. Because this is the only life you know. Because even though you were born into a world that offers little more than dirt toil and the promise of a short life, you cling to the moments between when the sun rises over the barley field, when your child giggles for no reason, when the fire is warm and no one is coughing. You live not for happiness. You live to survive. And in the medieval world, that alone is a miracle. You grow into your childhood like a weed between cobblestones, uninvited, unnoticed, but persistent. Your bare feet are calloused from endless days running across rough paths, dodging animal droppings, ducking under cartwheels, and skimming the edge of danger without realizing it. You don't play so much as survive in a slightly more entertaining way. Your games involve chasing chickens, climbing trees you're not supposed to touch, and inventing ways to splash the most mud onto your friends without falling into the pig trough. You don't own a mirror. You wouldn't recognize your own reflection, even if you passed by still water, because still water is rare and usually full of slime. You probably don't know what color your eyes are. You don't know what hygiene means. What you do know is that your hair always smells like smoke, your nails are always dirty, and your tunic has been patched and repatched so many times you've forgotten what the original fabric looked like. You have chores before you have choices. You wake with the sun and immediately set to work. No one tells you to. You just do. There's water to fetch from the well, and the well is a long walk through a muddy path surrounded by nettles and thorns. The bucket is heavy. You drag it back, spilling most of it, and hope your mother doesn't notice. Then it's time to feed the chickens, clean out the pen, gather firewood, and maybe, if there's still light, pick stones from the field. You are expected to be small but capable. Your hands are tiny, but that doesn't stop your father from shoving a hoe into them and showing you how to dig. Just like this, he grunts already 4 rows ahead of you. Keep your back down. Don't let the steward see you standing. You don't know what a childhood is. You only know that you're not allowed to waste time. Time is food. Time is life. Idleness is dangerous. On rare days when there is nothing urgent, you might sneak off into the woods. There's a clearing you and your siblings found last year, a patch of tall grass surrounded by birch trees. You lie there sometimes looking up at the sky, trying to imagine what it would be like to fly like the birds above you. But even that fantasy is interrupted by hunger, by a bite from a tick, by the sound of your name being shouted in frustration. You're always being called back, always needed. You begin to notice the pain early. Your joints ache when you wake. Your teeth hurt when you bite into cold bread. You get a cut on your hand and it turns red and swollen. There is no ointment, just spit and cloth and a whispered prayer. You ask your mother if you're dying. She tells you everyone feels like this. And so you learn to ignore pain. You learn that suffering is not exceptional, it's expected. You learn that if your back aches, you keep bending anyway. If your feet are raw, you keep walking. If your head throbs, you tighten your belt and keep going. The older villagers talk about saints and miracles, about angels and punishment. You nod and pretend to understand, but mostly you just watch their faces. You wonder how long it takes to get that many lines around your eyes. You hope you live that long, but you're not sure you want to. You attend Mass every week. The church is the tallest building you've ever seen. It smells of wax, old wood, and damp stone. The priest speaks in Latin, which you don't understand, but his voice is commanding, and he tells you what God wants. Apparently, God wants you to be obedient, to work hard, to suffer quietly, to be thankful for your place in life, even if it's near the bottom. You bow your head and fold your hands and try not to shift too much on the cold stone bench. You hope the priest doesn't notice you picking at your scabs. He tells you the rich will have their reward on earth, and you will have yours in heaven if you behave. You believe him because you have no other story to hold on to. Sometimes you hear rumors of other places. A traveling merchant tells stories of distant cities of people with silk robes and coins in their pockets. You hear about the king. You don't know his name or what he looks like, but you know he exists. Somewhere beyond the forests, beyond the rivers, beyond your imagination, he lives in a castle that touches the sky and eats meat every day. You can't fathom that much meat. You wonder if he's ever had pottage made from turnip peels and sour milk. Probably not. You think about running away once or twice. Into the forest, maybe. Joining a band of outlaws. Finding one of those distant cities. But the thought dissolves quickly. You know you'd die before you reached the next village. The woods are dark and full of wolves. And anyway, where would you go? You have no map, no shoes, no plan. You stay. Because staying is what everyone does. You watch your older brother go from boy to man almost overnight. One year he's chasing chickens with you. The next he's drafted to work full-time in the Lord's fields. He barely speaks anymore. His shoulders are hunched, his eyes dull. You hear him coughing at night. Your sister is betrothed at 14. You see her walking hand in hand with a man twice her age. She doesn't cry, but she stops laughing. You notice your parents aging rapidly. Their hands, always cracked and calloused, grow stiff in the winter. Their teeth are fewer every year. Their eyes don't light up anymore. They just look tired. They count every sack of grain, every bite of food, every day until next planting season. And you just keep growing. Not taller, not stronger, just older. A little more bent, a little more tired. a little more resigned. Because being a peasant isn't about growing up. It's about breaking in like a pair of worn boots or a beaten path. You get used to the pain. You adapt to the hunger. You adjust your dreams to fit inside the tiny walls of your world. And deep down you learn that being born a medieval peasant isn't just unlucky. It's a life sentence written in mud and sweat, sealed with silence. And you never had a say. The older you get, the more your life becomes indistinguishable from the land itself. You wake with the seasons, move with the sun, and carry the burdens of each day like you would carry a sack of barley on your back, grudgingly, instinctively, without question. You don't think in terms of days or weeks. You think in terms of planting, growing, harvesting, surviving. Your body is no longer your own. It belongs to the field, to the Lord, to your family, to the ancient rhythm that presses on every peasant's back like a yoke. Your muscles ache constantly, but that's just how things are. You don't even call it pain anymore. It's just your body reminding you it's still there. You rise before the light. Not because you choose to, but because it's required. If you wait until the sun's up, you've already lost time. The day begins with dew still thick on the grass, and the world hushed in a kind of breathless chill. You slip on your tunic still damp from yesterday's sweat, and step out into a world that hasn't changed since your grandparents were young. Your boots are wood and leather if you're lucky enough to have them. Otherwise, it's bare feet again. Mud squelches under your toes, cold and sticky. The animals greet you with grunts and low moans. You feed them first because they can't feed themselves. Chickens, pigs, the family cow if you're lucky. You learned long ago that if the animals die, you die soon after. Then it's off to the Lord's land. His fields stretch wider than yours, and they're better managed too. His soil is richer, his fences stronger. You notice it every time you walk to the manor grounds with your tools slung over your shoulder. Your workday isn't for your own benefit. You spend half your time working land that won't feed your family because that's what you owe. Owe for what? The right to not be evicted. The right to sleep on land that will never be yours. The right to live at the bottom of a system that was never built to serve you. You see the reeve standing near the oxen arms, crossed eyes sharp. He's just a peasant too, but one with slightly more power and considerably less kindness. He reports to the steward. The steward reports to the bailiff. The bailiff reports to the Lord. You report to the sun and the soil. And neither of them is feeling generous today. You join the line of men and women bending into the dirt. Your back will ache before the first hour's over. Your palms will blister if your calluses have softened too much. The sun climbs higher, and the work never slows. You hoe, you weed, you cut. You fall into the rhythm of labor until your thoughts blur and the ache becomes background noise. At midday, you stop for a short rest. You sit under a tree or crouch beside a fence post. You don't lie down. You can't risk looking lazy. You eat whatever your wife packed, maybe a crust of bread, maybe a bit of onion. The ale you drink is thin, sour, barely stronger than water, but it's cleaner than what comes from the well. You've seen what happens when the water turns. You don't want to bury another child this year. The Lord's men pass by on horses. They barely glance at you. Their boots are clean. Their cloaks are heavy. You look down when they pass, not because you're afraid, but because it's what's expected. If they don't see you, they can't remember to demand more. After your break, it's back to the rows. You hear a child crying somewhere in the distance. Another scolding. Another mistake. You know that voice. Your neighbor's boy no older than 10 trying to carry water and dropping half of it along the way. He'll be beaten for it. Not because anyone is cruel, but because everything is a lesson. Spilled water could mean dry bread. Dry bread means hunger, and hunger is death waiting just outside the door. By the time you return home, your legs feel like lead. Your fingers are swollen. The sun is low but not yet gone. There's still more to do, your own fields, your own animals, your own patch of earth that you somehow have to make feed 6 people. You work until twilight, until your vision blurs, and then only then do you stagger inside. The cottage is small, smoky, close. You duck to avoid the low beam. You set down your tools. Your wife is at the fire stirring a pot. You smell barley cabbage, maybe a trace of meat, if someone was generous or desperate. The children crowd around her, tired but still full of questions. Your youngest tugs on your tunic. Your eldest stares into the flames like he's already halfway to manhood. You eat slowly, carefully. There is never enough to waste. After dinner, there's no time for leisure. You repair a broken bucket. Your wife darns a stocking. Your son sharpens the blade that's dulled from weeks of use. The firelight flickers across the walls, casting shadows that dance like ghosts. You hear the priest's bell in the distance. Vespers. You murmur a prayer under your breath. Not because you think it will change anything, but because it's what you've always done. Faith is the only inheritance you've received in full. You curl up on your bed of straw and wool scraps. The itch is familiar. The cold creeps in around the door. You pull your child close, using their warmth like another blanket. The thatch roof creaks. The wind howls. You hear rats scampering in the rafters. You stare into the dark. And you think just for a second about what your life might have been like if you'd been born noble. With servants. With clean hands. With warm food and soft clothes and time to think about things other than hunger and frostbite. But that thought passes quickly. Because you weren't born noble. You were born peasant, which means tomorrow you'll do it all again. Morning never waits for you. You wake before your body is ready, before your eyes are open, before your thoughts have returned to you. The cock crows like a curse outside, and even through the thick smoke still hanging in the air from the hearth, you feel the cold clinging to your face. Your joints are stiff. Your knees ache. You try to stretch, but there's no room. Someone's foot is wedged under your ribs, and one of the children has rolled halfway on top of you in the night. The cottage is dim, quiet, except for the shifting sounds of sleep, your wife's soft breathing, your youngest murmuring in dreams, the pop and hiss of the hearth's last embers dying away. You don't want to move, but you have to. Because there is no such thing as sleeping in. Not for a peasant. You swing your legs off the straw mattress and touch your feet to the dirt floor. It's cold, wet, cold, the kind that crawls up your bones and settles in your spine. You pull on yesterday's tunic. There is no such thing as a clean change of clothes. The fabric is stiff with sweat and earth-patched so many times you can't remember the last original thread. You try not to wake the others, but the baby stirs. Your wife, already half awake, reaches to hush him, pulling him close. She smiles at you with tired eyes. It's the only warmth you'll get this morning. You step outside into fog and silence. The air smells like wet straw and animal dung. The thatch roof still drips from last night's rain. Your boots, if you have them, are already soaked. The mud pulls at your steps as you cross the yard to the pen. The pigs grunt. The chickens scuttle. The goat bleats with a hoarse, demanding cry. They're hungry just like you. You toss feed into the trough, check the fence for gaps, and then make your way to the well. You haul the bucket up, hand over hand, the the rope slick and rough beneath your fingers. You try not to think about how many others have touched it today, or how many buckets are drawn from the same water, used to wash, to clean, to cook, to drink. Back inside, your wife is preparing what passes for breakfast, pottage thin and pale, stirred with a stick and thickened with barley flour. No milk today, the cow is drying. You sit on the floor with the children and eat in silence, scooping from the communal pot with a carved spoon. Each child gets a little, not enough, but enough to keep them standing. You don't linger after eating. There's no reason to. The field waits and it doesn't care if your back still hurts from yesterday. Today you're working your own land, or at least the patch that's been loaned to you by the manor, in exchange for your labor obligations. You grab your tools and walk to the field, the weight of them familiar against your shoulder. Your son walks beside you now, tall enough to swing a hoe without tripping. He doesn't complain, not out loud. But you can tell he's tired. You were tired at his age too. You still are. The field looks the same as always, uneven, patchy, lined with rocks you've pulled up and moved countless times. You start with weeding. There's never an end to weeds. You bend at the waist, reach, pull, toss, over and over again. Your hands are already raw, your breath short. The sun hasn't even risen fully. By midday, your legs are trembling. You sit briefly to chew a piece of bread your wife packed hard as stone, but better than nothing. You pass a bit to your son. He tears off a piece and eats without a word. You both sip from the same flask. It's thin ale, barely fermented, but enough to keep your thirst from choking you. After the break, you dig irrigation ditches. The earth fights you every inch. It's either too dry or too wet. You dig anyway, sweating under the sun. You remember stories from the priest about paradise where the land gives without effort, where the harvest is eternal. You wonder what that feels like. You've only ever known soil that resists. You stop once to rub your lower back. Your hand comes away sticky. Blood again. You tore a scab from yesterday's cut. You wipe it on your tunic and keep going. In the afternoon, the steward passes by on his horse. He looks down at you with vague boredom, then jots something on his tablet. Maybe he's recording the day's labor. Maybe he's counting heads. Maybe he's just reminding you who holds the power. You don't meet his eye. You never do. Later, you notice the clouds thickening. Rain is coming. Again. You rush to finish the row, your son now limping from a blistered heel. You tell him to rest, but he shakes his head and keeps going. He wants to be like you. You wish he wouldn't. By the time you return home, the rain is just beginning to fall. Your wife greets you with a nod. The cottage smells like onions and something vaguely burnt. Dinner. You drop your tools, remove your tunic, and sit near the fire, letting the warmth sink into your skin. Your daughter brings you a rag to wipe your face. She giggles when you pull her into your lap and tickle her ribs. For a moment, the cottage is laughter and light. But it doesn't last. Your son winces when he removes his boot. The blister has torn. Your wife examines it with a frown. You clean it with ale, no better options, and bind it in cloth. You hope it doesn't fester. As night falls, the wind picks up. The thatch roof rustles above. You hear the rats stirring in the corners. The fire pops and crackles. Your wife feeds the baby. You sit with your back against the wall, your arms crossed, your thoughts drifting. What if you'd been born elsewhere, a town maybe? A monastery, the castle kitchens, even a blacksmith's apprentice, anything but a peasant. But you weren't. You were born to this soil, to this labor, to this ceiling of smoke-stained rafters and dreams the size of a cabbage patch. You lie down, pull your children close, and close your eyes. Tomorrow the ditch will need finishing. Tomorrow the steward will return. Tomorrow the hunger might come back. But tonight, you rest, as well as a peasant ever can. The storm doesn't wait until morning. It creeps in just after midnight first, with the wind slipping through the cracks in the thatch, then with the rain sharp and relentless. It taps the roof like fingers at first, then drums harder until the whole cottage trembles with it. You stir from sleep in the dark, the damp already seeping through the ceiling. A steady drip, drip, drip sounds above your head. You shift your body away from the wet patch without opening your eyes. You already know it's raining. You pull your youngest closer to shield him. His bare feet are cold against your legs. One of the children is coughing dry and rhythmic, the kind that keeps time with the thunder. You hear your wife shift across the straw, her hands patting around for a cloth to stuff in the drip above your daughter's head. You don't speak. There's no point. You both know the roof is too thin, the straw too old. By morning the floor is slick and muddy, and the fire has nearly died. The air smells of smoke rot and wet wool. You can see your breath in the room. The ash in the hearth is cold, and the few dry sticks left won't light easily. You huddle near your wife, shielding the fire as she tries again and again with flint and steel. Sparks fly. Nothing catches. Eventually, a small flame wavers into life, then flares. The warmth is weak but precious. You feed it carefully, like a secret. The children stir one by one, stiff and sullen, sniffling from the cold. Your daughter's straw bed is soaked. You hang it over the beam, hoping it dries before night returns. There's no going to the fields today. The soil will be thick and heavy. Tools won't cut through it. Your boots would sink. The reeve will still expect you tomorrow, though. He doesn't care about storms. If you don't show, someone else will take your row and your share of the yield. So today becomes a day for other kinds of labor. You begin by inspecting the damage. The wall near the door is leaking again. The wattle is cracked. You'll need to patch it with fresh daub mud and straw, maybe with some animal dung if you can find it. The thatch must be repacked too. More straw, more twine. You wonder if you can spare it from the bedding. Your wife sends the children out to gather sticks and brambles between showers. She wraps their feet in old cloth to keep the cold from biting, but you know it won't help much. They return wet and red-faced arms full of damp kindling. You try to dry it near the hearth, turning it every few minutes, watching it steam. The stew from yesterday is stretched for breakfast. It's mostly water now, with a few floating pieces of cabbage and some barley that never fully softened. You sip it anyway. Warm food is warm food. You feel it settle in your stomach like a stone. The children are quiet as they eat. They know better than to complain. After eating, you bring out your tools, what's left of them. The hoe needs binding. The head is loose. You scrape the handle with a shard of bone pack in fresh bark and wrap it tightly with soaked leather. It's crude, but you know it will hold. It has to. Your son sits beside you, sharpening a knife on a whetstone. You watch his hands steady now, not the clumsy fumbling of a few years ago. He's growing, faster than you expected. You wonder how long it will be before he's called to labor full-time. Before he takes your place in the field while your back gives way and your knees refuse to bend. Later, you mend a basket with willow twigs. Your wife spins thread from nettle fibers. Your daughter picks lice from her sister's hair. These are the hours people never write about, the hours where you keep everything from falling apart, thread by thread, splinter by splinter. As the rain pauses, you and your wife step outside to check the thatch. The ladder is just a beam with notches hacked into it. It creaks under your weight. You climb slowly, hands cold and slick against the rungs, and peer at the soaked rooftop. The straw has slid loose in several places. You wedge it back with clumps from the barn, tying it down with strips of bark. Your fingers go numb. Your knees shake. But when you descend, soaked and filthy, your wife squeezes your hand. Just for a moment. Just enough. Inside the cottage is warmer now. The fire burns steadily, and the smell of drying wood fills the air. You eat again, bread this time hard and bitter. You dip it into broth to soften it. Your teeth still hurt after every meal, but you've stopped noticing. Pain like cold is just background now. After the chores are done, you sit by the hearth, children curled in your lap, your wife spinning beside you. You hum something under your breath, an old tune from your mother's time, though you don't remember all the words. The cottage is still leaking. The walls are still damp. The rats still skitter in the corners. But the fire glows. And for tonight, you have shelter. When darkness comes, you pack the fire with what dry wood you can spare. Your wife wraps the baby in a scrap of wool, holding him against her chest. The older children huddle under the patchy blanket. You lie down beside them all, pulling your knees to your chest, listening to the wind rattle the shutters. You think of spring. You always think of spring and winter. You picture the trees budding, the snow melting, the smell of turned earth. You cling to that thought as the wind howls and the roof drips steadily beside your head. Because no matter how cold it gets, no matter how long the storm lasts, you know the seasons never stop. They don't wait for you, don't favor you, but they move forward. And if you can just hold on long enough, maybe just maybe the next one will be gentler. You close your eyes. The storm keeps raging, but you've lived through worse, and you plan to live through this too. The storm finally passes, but it doesn't leave quietly. The ground is a sodden mess. Mud sucks at your boots with every step, and the ditches overflow with brown water that bubbles and swirls like it's angry. The air is thick with the smell of rot, wet thatch, manure, mildew. Puddles have collected in every hollow. Your field looks more like a swamp than a place meant for growing food. You stand in the doorway that morning, chewing a piece of dry bread and staring at the damage. Nothing's destroyed. But nothing's fine either. The plants will survive, most of them. But they'll need sun now and time and luck, and you never have enough of those. Behind you, the children are squabbling over who gets the flatter straw spot on the bed. You don't turn around. You just chew slow and mechanical. Your jaw aches from days of grinding. You swallow hard, but the bread sits like stone in your belly. Your wife joins you. She doesn't speak at first, just stands beside you, pulling her shawl tighter around her shoulders. Finally, she says what you're already thinking. We'll have to do more. More work. More patching. More sewing. More praying. That's always the answer. No one offers relief. No one rides in from the manor with sacks of grain. The storm hits everyone, but no one helps the peasant recover. You're expected to bend, not break, so you bend. You start by dragging a rake across the rows, trying to channel the standing water away from the roots. It's thick, heavy work. Your arms ache with every pull. The mud clings like it wants to eat your tools. You splash through it, slipping twice, falling once. You curse under your breath, not at God, but at everything else, at the clouds, the wind, the unfairness of it all. Your son joins you in silence. He's growing taller now, but still lean. His hands are blistered like yours. You hand him the spade, and he starts digging drainage trenches along the edge. He doesn't ask questions. He knows what to do, you taught him. The other children are helping your wife at the cottage. Cleaning, sorting, sewing. The baby is strapped to her back, content to bounce along as she stirs a pot of porridge and scolds your daughter for tracking mud inside. You miss the days when they were too young to understand what was happening. When they thought hunger was just a game, when they believed the cottage was the whole world. But now they're old enough to see the tired lines on your wife's face. The way your hand trembles when you think no one's watching. The way you mutter prayers, not for salvation, but for seeds to sprout and blisters not to fester. At noon, you take a break. Your wife brings you a bit of stew, thinner than usual, but warm. She sits beside you on the grass. You both watch the clouds move across the sky in uneasy silence. Too many dark ones still. The sun is trying to break through, but like everything else in your world, it struggles. You ask her almost jokingly, do you remember what it's like to be dry? She chuckles, once dry as the earth used to be. Only in church, and that's because the roof's stone. You eat without speaking again, trading the spoon back and forth. One bite for you, one for her, until the bowl is empty. You wipe your hands on your tunic and go back to work. The afternoon is slow. Your shoulders are burning. Your fingers are numb. The wind picks up again, and you flinch every time a leaf rustles, expecting more rain, but it holds off. Your neighbor Edric walks past, nods to you, then pauses. He looks worn, more so than usual. You see the hesitation in his eyes, the silent calculation. He finally speaks. Lost the back corner of my roof. Wife's trying to hold it together with sacks and a prayer. You glance toward your barn. You have spare straw, barely. You know what it would mean to give some away. But you also know what it means to do nothing. You nod. Come by tomorrow. He looks surprised, then grateful. No more words are needed. That's how it works among peasants. You help when you can. You survive by the kindness of people just as poor as you. By sunset, your boots are soaked through again. You peel them off by the door, leaving them upright to dry by the fire. Your wife's managed to dry some of the soaked bedding from the storm. She's mended one of the children's tunics. Her fingers are stiff from the needle, and her eyes squint in the dim firelight. She tells you the cow gave milk again today. Just a little. You smile. That's more than enough reason to celebrate. Dinner is the last of the carrots stewed into a thick mash. You all eat slowly, carefully. The children huddle around the fire with their bowls, and you feel something like peace settle over the room. It's not joy, not relief, just peace. No one is sick. No one is crying. No one is hungry, not really. You sit beside your wife, your shoulders touching. She leans her head against you for a moment, before rising to put the baby to sleep. The fire pops gently. The wind sighs. The storm is gone. And even though tomorrow will bring more labor, more uncertainty, more aches in places that never fully heal tonight, you have enough. Enough warmth. Enough food. Enough hope to last until morning. And in your world, that's more than most ever get. The smell of dung hits you first thing the next morning. Not fresh, but baked in like everything else in your life. The floor is dry now, at least, and the last drips from the thatch have stopped. The fire is out, but the ashes are still warm, and that's enough to get a spark going again. You blow softly into the kindling until a faint glow flickers back to life. It feels like waking a sleeping child. The baby stirs, then begins to cry. Your wife is already up cradling him. You stretch slowly, and feel every joint protest like rusted hinges. Your shoulders are tight, your knees click, but you move anyway. Always. You dress in silence, no fresh tunic, just the same one patched under both arms, stiff with yesterday's labor. You run your fingers through your hair and feel the grit still stuck to your scalp. You think of water, clean water, a bath even, but that's a nobleman's luxury. You settle for a splash from the bucket near the door, cool and metallic in your hands. Outside, the village is already moving. A rooster crows. Dogs bark and scramble through the mud. Smoke curls up from neighboring chimneys. You catch a glimpse of old Mother Aldith pulling a cart of turnips, her back hunched like a crooked tree, wrapped in layers that don't seem to keep the cold out. Your son joins you at the gate. He's grown quiet lately, not moody, not sullen, just watchful. You recognize the look. It's the same one your father had when times were lean and the sky gave no rain. The look of someone learning too young that life doesn't care if you're ready. You send him to check the traps near the wood. Sometimes a rabbit, sometimes a bird, sometimes nothing. But you always hope. Every bit of meat matters. You head to the village commons. Once a week it becomes the bustling heart of your world. The marketplace, if it can be called that. A stretch of earth flattened by countless feet surrounded by the same weather-beaten faces. There are baskets of eggs, bundles of leeks, a few rough jugs of ale, hard cheese wrapped in cloth. Someone's bartering for wool. Another is haggling over a hen that looks half dead already. You've brought turnips and a spool of thread your wife spun last week. Nothing special, but enough to trade. You speak little, mostly nodding, weighing, assessing. One man offers stale bread in return. Another tries to swap a broken stool. Finally, you settle on half a sack of barley and a hunk of salted fish. A good deal, relatively speaking. You hear a commotion near the church. A cart has broken an axle. The wheel lies in pieces. The man pulling it is red-faced, cursing while the priest tries to calm him. You don't get involved. You've got your own wheel to keep turning. You pass the blacksmith's forge, just a shed with a slanted roof and a chimney coughing black smoke. The blacksmith's arms are thick as tree trunks, his face permanently flushed. He's working a blade hammer, striking iron in rhythmic bursts. You pause to watch, if only for a second. There's something hypnotic about the glow of molten metal. Power contained, controlled. You wish your own work felt that way. But farming isn't fire and steel. It's slow, uncertain, constantly at the mercy of things you can't predict. A week of rain and the crop rots. A single frost and the buds die in their sleep. A flock of birds and your grain disappears overnight. You fight 1,000 silent battles and no one sings songs about any of them. On the way home, you pass the manor again. The contrast stings more today. Fresh rushes on the path. Windows of oiled cloth clearer than anything you own. You hear music drifting from within. Someone's playing a lute. Laughter follows. Probably wine, too. You think about what lies behind those walls, clean linen, soft beds, roast meat, servants to light the fire, nurses to hush the crying, a roof that doesn't leak, a life where storms are something you watch, not endure. But you keep walking. You can't afford envy, not when there's still work to do. Back home, your wife is sewing again, the children nearby. The baby is asleep, head lolling sideways like a little sack of grain. You show her the barley and the fish. She smiles. She's too tired to say much, but the look in her eyes says thank you. You eat together in the late afternoon. The fish is tough and salty, but better than the usual. Your daughter makes a face, but your wife hushes her with a tap on the hand. No complaining. Ever. Afterward, you take a moment to sit outside, just for a minute. The sun is low, washing everything in a pale gold light. The mud has dried into thick cracks, the kind that split beneath your feet when you walk too fast. You see birds fluttering in the hedgerows. A fox sneaks along the edge of the field, hunting for scraps. Somewhere nearby, someone is singing a lullaby, maybe soft and haunting. And for one fleeting moment, you forget the cold, the ache, the endless cycle of work and weather. You just exist, right here, right now. But it never lasts. The wind shifts. The baby cries. A roof beam groans. The spell breaks. You go inside, close the door, and prepare for the night. There's a hole in the wall that you've stuffed with rags. You notice the wind has pushed them loose again. You fix it. That's what your life is, fixing things that fall apart. Over and over, without thanks, without pause. Because you were born a peasant, and peasants don't rest. They endure. There's a saying in your village, no one knows who started it, that God made peasants with strong backs and quiet mouths. You don't know if that's true, but you do know this: your back carries the world, and your mouth stays shut most days. This morning, like every morning, begins not with choice but necessity. The light creeping through the cracks in the wall isn't soft or golden. It's pale, sharp, and indifferent. It means you've overslept, even if only by minutes. You jolt upright, heart already thudding with a sense of lateness. There's no clock, no bells for you, but you've learned to feel time in your bones when it's slipping away, when it's grinding you down. The hearth is cold again. Your wife, already awake, is kneeling beside it, coaxing embers to life. Her hands move with muscle memory, not thought. The children are groggy, slow to rise. One of them has a fever, your daughter, the smallest. She's flushed and breathing too fast, and her forehead feels like boiled cloth. You feel a knot form in your chest. There's no physician, no medicine, no clinic waiting. Only herbs, warm broth, and hope. Maybe the fever will pass. Maybe it won't. You've buried 2 already. You've seen mothers weep with dry eyes because the tears ran out weeks before the child did. But the day waits for no one, not even the sick. Your wife wraps the little one in layers and lays her near the fire, murmuring old prayers under her breath. You look at your son and nod toward the field. He doesn't hesitate. He just pulls on his boots and follows. That's how it works now. Words are too costly. Out in the field, the earth is firmer than you expected. The rain has finally retreated far enough that the soil can breathe again. You set to work, turning it over row by row. The blade of your spade slices into the ground with a dull thud, and you keep moving rhythmically, mechanically, as if digging through the weight of your own exhaustion. A neighbor passes by, Elfric, older than you, hunched, like a question mark, eyes half-lidded from too many bad harvests. He nods. You nod back. It's the closest thing to conversation most men have out here. You've known him for years. You don't know how many children he has, or if he remembers all their names. The sky is wide, pale blue and streaked with clouds that move like slow animals. Somewhere in the distance, a bell rings from the manor chapel. Not for you. That bell is for the priest's matins, for the nobles' morning prayers, for the pages and squires learning to read Latin while you break your back for turnips. But still the sound reaches you. And in a strange way, it's almost comforting. Not because you believe your toil is sanctified, but because it means someone somewhere is awake with you. By mid-morning, your arms are trembling. Your son is red-faced, breathing through his mouth. You pause to drink the ale, flat and lukewarm, but better than nothing. You tear a crust of bread in half and hand him a piece. He takes it without speaking. Sometimes you want to tell him how proud you are, how strong he's become. But pride feels dangerous. Pride feels like a luxury you can't afford. Because the moment you let your guard down, something always breaks your tools, your health, your hope. At noon, you return to check on your daughter. Her fever is worse. Her eyes flutter when she sees you, and she whispers something you can't hear. Your wife dabs her head with a cloth soaked in elderflower and water. She shakes her head just slightly. You feel a coldness in your chest that has nothing to do with the weather. Still, you eat. You feed the others. You press on. The afternoon is for gathering firewood. You take the boys into the woods further than usual. The branches have been stripped clean near the edge. You walk silently, eyes scanning the ground. Every fallen limb is potential warmth. Every dry twig is a gift. You pile them high arms, straining legs, wobbling with the weight on the return trip. You pass by the churchyard on the way home. There are fresh mounds there, 3 of them. No markers, just stones. You don't ask who they were. You don't want to know. The fewer names you attach to death, the easier it is to keep going. That night you don't eat much. The porridge is thin again. You give your bowl to your son, who tries to protest but doesn't push hard. Your daughter moans softly in her sleep. Her breathing is shallow. The fire glows weakly. You sit awake longer than usual. You think of saints and relics, of miracles. You try to remember the story the priest told about Lazarus rising from the dead. You try to believe it. But the fire crackles and the child's breathing falters, and the only miracle here is that your heart keeps beating through all of it. Your wife lays a hand on your arm. She doesn't say anything. She doesn't need to. In the corner, a rat scurries behind a basket. A piece of the thatch sags slightly, letting the wind hiss through. You are surrounded by things that wear down wood straw cloth flesh. Even your thoughts are frayed at the edges. And yet you endure. You always endure. Because to be a peasant isn't just to suffer. It's to survive the slow erosion of everything and still rise each morning. Still tend the field. Still hold your child's hand when her fever burns your skin. Still hope against all odds that tomorrow will be better, even when you know it won't be. The fever breaks just before dawn. You're not awake when it happens. You've finally drifted off, sitting upright, head against the cold wall, feet stretched out toward the fire's dying glow. But when your wife shakes you gently, her eyes red-rimmed but smiling faintly, you understand. Your daughter is breathing easier. Her skin is no longer hot to the touch. She's still weak, but there's color in her cheeks again. Not much, but enough. You sit by her side for a moment in silence, just watching the way her tiny chest rises and falls, slow and steady like the rhythm of the earth. She opens her eyes once, just long enough to see you, and then slips back into sleep. But she's not fighting anymore, not struggling to breathe, just sleeping the way children are meant to. Your wife cries, but quietly. She presses a kiss to the little one's forehead and wipes her own eyes with the back of her sleeve. Then, without another word, she gets up and starts preparing the day. There's no time for rest. The fields are still waiting. You pull on your tunic again, still stiff with dried sweat and soil. Your hands are swollen at the joints, too much gripping, too little healing. You try flexing your fingers, and 2 of them crack loudly, but you're grateful they still move at all. Outside, the world is a mixture of thaw and frost. Patches of frozen earth crunch beneath your boots, but here and there, soft puddles have formed remnants of the storm. A crow perches on a bare branch, black feathers gleaming in the cold light. You nod to it, and for a moment it feels like it nods back. Your son meets you at the gate. He's already gathered the tools, and he hands you the hoe without a word. The two of you walk side by side down the path, the morning mist still clinging to the hedges. There's a strange energy in you today, not strength, not joy, but something close to relief. You've cheated loss again, narrowly, quietly, and now life continues. That's the cruelest thing about it, really. Suffering stops for no one. Even when your heart nearly breaks, the barley still needs sowing. At the field, the soil is waking. It's looser now, ready to receive. The first signs of spring are teasing the edges of your world. Tiny shoots, green and trembling, poke up from the corners where the snow has melted. A miracle, small and quiet. You begin to work. You swing the hoe, break the clods, clear the weeds. You've done it 1,000 times, maybe more. Every row you open is like a wound, but it's also a promise. You press seeds into the earth with fingers that barely feel anymore. You whisper a prayer with every handful, not for abundance, but for just enough. Just enough to keep everyone breathing. Just enough to survive another winter. Your son hums a tune as he works a little thing tuneless and wandering, probably one he made up himself. You haven't heard it before. It lingers in the air like warmth curling around the cold breeze. It reminds you that even in a life like this, beauty sometimes sneaks in through the cracks. Around midday, you break for bread and a bit of cheese. You sit on the edge of the field, backs to the wind. Your son asks if the cow gave milk this morning. You shake your head, but tell him it's likely tomorrow. He nods. Neither of you says what you're both thinking, that you're running low, that a few more dry days, and you'll be boiling nettles for broth again. Back home, your daughter is awake. Her voice is scratchy, but she manages a few words. She asks if she can go outside. Your wife tells her no, but promises soon. The girl sighs and rests her head on her mother's shoulder. You bring her a wooden toy, something you carved years ago for one of the older children, smoothed by time and small hands. A little sheep painted with a bit of soot and chalk. Her face lights up. For a moment, the cottage feels full. The fire crackles. The stew simmers. The children chatter soft and sleepy. You close your eyes and listen. Sometimes silence isn't absence, it's peace. But you don't let yourself settle for long. After all, you have repairs to make. One of the roof beams is starting to sag. You fetch your tools and climb up into the rafters. The air is dusty close. You work slowly, prying, wedging, tying. As you move along the beam, your fingers brush against something tucked into the thatch. A bird's nest. Empty now, but still warm from the last sunlight. You leave it there. It doesn't feel right to take it down. Even birds need shelter. In the evening, you fetch water from the well. The path there is worn by 1,000 feet. Each step echoes with the weight of generations. You pass the same hedges, the same stones, the same wooden post leaning at an angle no one's ever bothered to fix. The water is cold, clear, and surprisingly sweet today. You fill the bucket and pause a moment, watching the ripple settle. You see your reflection, lined, tired, gaunt. But your eyes hold something else now. A kind of quiet fire. Not hope. Not exactly. But something older than hope. Something like endurance carved deep into the bone. When night falls, you gather with your family by the hearth. The fire is small but warm. The stew is thin but filling. Your daughter falls asleep in your lap, her fingers curled around yours. Your wife leans against your shoulder. Your son yawns loudly, head bobbing. You think just briefly about tomorrow, about the work, about the rain that might come, or the pestilence that might return, or the reeve who might raise your dues, but not for long, because tonight there is breath in your daughter's lungs. There is warmth in your home. There is food in your bowl. And if you were born a peasant, cursed to labor, to hunger, to suffer, you were also born with the strength to carry others when they falter, to hold the line between death and life with nothing but your body and your will. That too is a kind of power, one no lord can ever understand. You wake up to birdsong, not the kind of birdsong that floats gently through a noble's window while they sip warm cider and stretch beneath silk sheets. No, this one's sharp and loud, and perched right above your thatch roof, shrieking like it has something urgent to say. Still, it's better than waking to thunder or coughing or the silence of dread. You blink against the early light, the smell of ash and wool in your nose, the ache in your spine greeting you like an old friend. The air inside the cottage is cold again, your breath fogs just slightly, and you can hear the wind brushing its fingers along the eaves, testing for weaknesses in the wall. The fire's nearly gone out. Your wife is already feeding it gently, one stick at a time. She moves slowly this morning, her knees stiff, her eyes heavy-lidded, but she smiles at you, and that alone makes the day feel half bearable. Your daughter is better, not well, not ready to play or help with chores, but her colors returning, her breathing calm. She's awake and watching the dancing firelight, as if it's a performance just for her. You start the day with warm water and oats barely sweetened with the last of the dried apples from autumn. The children eat quietly. Your son chews with determination, as though willing strength into his body. Then it's out the door again. There's always something. Today it's the fences. 2 of them along the north field have begun to buckle. Not from wind or age, but because the neighbors' pigs, God bless them, have taken a liking to pushing through for scraps. You don't blame them. Hunger makes animals out of all of us. You spend the morning hauling wood, hammering in pegs, tightening rope. You try to patch the weakest spots with bundles of brush and old cloth. It's ugly work and it won't last long, but for now, it keeps the pigs out and the illusion of order intact. As you work, the manor steward rides by. He doesn't dismount, just slows his horse and nods in your direction. You nod back respectfully, eyes lowered. His boots are polished, his cloak trimmed in fur. His beard is too clean for someone who's ever touched dirt. He's counting heads today. Taxes, you know. Always taxes. The planting season means new assessments. Every household will be expected to give regardless of what they've already lost to storms or illness. The noble's needs always come first. You feel his gaze linger on your fence, on the sagging barn, on your patched tunic. Then he spurs the horse on without a word. You don't curse him, not aloud. But you think about how your entire life can be measured and valued by someone who doesn't know your name, by someone who's never lifted a spade or buried a child or wondered how to stretch one loaf across 4 days, by someone born lucky. You finish the fence just as the sun peaks above the trees. Your hands are raw and your shirt sticks to your back. You wipe your face with a rag and head to the stream. It's one of the few places you go alone. The stream is narrow, winding through a low patch of reeds hidden between the woods and the fields. The water runs cold year-round, fed by springs you'll never see. You kneel beside it, cup your hands and drink. The taste is sharp and pure, better than ale, better than wine. It cuts through the tiredness like a blessing. You splash water over your face, down your neck, into your hair. For a moment, the aches dull and you feel almost human again. You sit there for a while, listening, breathing, watching the dragonflies flicker like living sparks above the water. These are the moments no one ever writes down, the spaces between survival, the little glimmers of quiet when you aren't working or grieving or praying for something to grow. You've learned to treasure them more than gold, because they're yours, untaxed, unclaimed. You walk back with your boots damp and your thoughts quieter. In the village, the priest is preaching in the square. You hear snatches of his voice rising over the chatter of geese and gossip. The meek shall inherit the earth. You want to believe it. You want to believe that this life, this endless labor, this groaning world of mud and loss and hunger leads somewhere. That you're not just breaking your back so another man can feast. That something holy lives in calluses and cracked lips, and children sleeping peacefully on straw. You don't attend the sermon, though. You've heard it too many times. And today there's barley to sift and tools to sharpen. When you return to the cottage, your wife shows you her work. 3 new bundles of wool thread dyed with onion skins and nettle. She's proud, and she should be. It's fine thread, strong and even, the kind that might fetch good trade come market day. You take her hands and squeeze them. No words, just thanks. You eat supper in silence. Your daughter sits upright now, her cheeks fuller. She even tries a little song off key and too quiet, but it makes the others laugh. You haven't heard them laugh in days. It sounds like sunlight through a dirty window, soft, rare, beautiful. The fire burns low. The night comes in like a sigh. And as you lie on your straw pallet, you stare at the wooden beams overhead and think not about tomorrow, but about your hands. How they've become the shape of labor. How your nails are blackened, your knuckles swollen, your palms blistered. How every mark tells a story no one will ever read. And still you do it all again, because the world doesn't care how much it takes from you, but your family does. And in the quiet of your small crumbling cottage surrounded by those you've carried through another day, you know one simple truth. To be a medieval peasant is misery, but to endure it for someone else that somehow makes the suffering worth it. Another storm rolls in during the night. You hear it before it arrives. Low thunder, like the growl of something ancient crawling over the hills toward your village. The roof shudders with each gust, and the thatch hisses under the first few drops. Then all at once the rain lashes down like 1,000 nails being driven into the earth. You sit up in the dark, listening. You know this rhythm too well. The storm isn't just weather, it's a threat. Because when it rains like this, it means something will break, something will flood, something will rot. You get up quietly and press your hand to the door. Cold wind whistles through the gaps in the frame. You add a plank across the bottom wedge, a stone against it. You hope it holds. You check the rafters next, searching for leaks, your fingers brushing along the beams, damp, where the thatch has grown thin. By morning, the ground outside has turned to mush. You step into it, barefoot boots slung over your shoulder to stay dry, no point soaking them before the day even begins. Your foot sinks half a finger deep, the mud curling around your toes like something alive. You pull free with a grunt and begin your rounds. The chicken coop is flooded. One of the hens is soaked and dead, her feathers matted and limp like a discarded rag. You bury her quickly, say a short prayer. Another life gone. Another piece of your tiny world chipped away. The pig pen somehow is worse. The fence you repaired is leaning again, and the pigs are knee-deep in muck, their snouts twitching in confusion. You don't have time to rebuild, not today, so you reinforce it with broken barrels and stones, anything you can drag over. One of the pigs squeals at you, indignant, as though it knows you're doing a poor job. You mutter an apology, you're not sure it understands. The fields, a disaster. Rivulets of brown water cut through the furrows, dragging away soil seeds and days of labor. You stand there helpless, watching it vanish. Everything you planted stolen by the sky, no warning, no fairness, just gone. You kneel and try to stem the erosion with your hands piling clumps of earth into the channels, but it's like trying to dam a river with hope. Your son arrives behind you wide-eyed, and for a moment you don't know what to say. You just hand him a spade and keep digging. By midday, you're covered in muck, your back screaming, your arms trembling. You rest only when you physically can't move anymore. You both sit in the wet field, your legs stretched out before you like broken tools. Your son drinks from the water skin and passes it to you. You take a long pull. The water is warm from your body heat, but it tastes like life. Neither of you speaks. You just listen to the rain easing, to the distant rustle of wind in the reeds, to the crows watching from the treetops like judges in a high place. Back home, your wife has been bailing out the cottage with a bucket. The hearth is cold again. Everything is damp. Your daughter sits wrapped in blankets, too tired to speak, her skin pale. You offer her a bit of dried plum, the last one. She eats it slowly, savoring it like it's a feast. You remove your tunic, soaked and heavy, and hang it near the fire. Your body is speckled with bruises and raw patches from the day. You glance at your wife, she's brushing mud from her skirt, her face tight with worry. You can see the question in her eyes. What if the next storm is worse? You don't answer it. You don't have to. Because every peasant already knows there's always a worse storm coming. That evening, the steward returns. His boots are dry, his cloak spotless. He rides under a waxed canopy, a boy servant following on foot. He dismounts at the edge of the village and calls for the heads of households. You gather near the church, the villagers forming a half-circle in the drizzle. The steward reads from a scroll. The harvest expectations have risen. The Lord expects additional tithes this year, more grain, more wool, more labor days. The church will also require another offering, candles, coins, anything of value. Someone protests, a man named Godric, bold and broad-shouldered. He steps forward and says, the storm has ruined the fields, that no one can meet these demands without starving. The steward doesn't argue. He just nods to the servant who pulls out a small sack. He tosses it to the ground. It thuds softly, coins probably. Then borrow, the steward says. The implication is clear. Borrow from the manor. Go into debt. Be owned a little more than you already are. Godric stares at the sack, jaw clenched. Then he spits in the mud and walks away. You don't move. You can't afford defiance. You nod like everyone else, because you know what happens when peasants say no. Back at the cottage, your son asks what it means to borrow. You explain gently. You tell him it means giving tomorrow's labor for today's survival, that it means tying yourself to the Lord's mercy a little tighter. He frowns and asks if it's worth it. You don't answer. You just pull him close and say, we'll manage. Because lying is part of survival, too. The fire finally takes. You eat gruel and scrape the pot. Your daughter falls asleep on your wife's lap. The storm outside has passed, but your body still feels like it's shaking from the inside out. As you lie down staring again at the beams, the wind finds the crack in the wall once more. It hums softly, almost like a lullaby. And you remember something the old priest once said about how the meek shall inherit the earth. You almost laugh, because if that's true, then you muddy and broken and half-starved must be next in line for the throne. Morning comes not with light, but with a dull gray haze clinging to everything, like the world itself is still weary from the storm. You wake to the sound of dripping, slow, methodical off the edge of the roof into a bucket placed just right to catch the leak. It's already half full. You pour it out, replace it, and listen for the quiet sounds of your family, still sleeping. For once, even the rooster is late. Maybe he's as tired as the rest of you. You're not sure how much longer your cottage can hold. The storm stripped away another layer of thatch. The mud walls are sweating moisture. One of the roof beams creaks ominously every time the wind brushes against it. This house built with your own hands, patched and mended season after season, is slowly dissolving around you. And still, there's no time to fix it. You lace your boots with fingers that don't feel quite like yours anymore. Numbness has become part of your morning routine, like prayer, or bracing your shoulders for the day. There's market in the next village over. 5 miles of mud and rutted road, and your wife insists on going. She wants to trade the thread she dyed and maybe some dried herbs for a bit of lamp oil or salt. Things you can't grow, no matter how hard you try. You agree. Of course you agree. The market is hope. The market is risk. She wraps her goods in cloth pins, her shawl close around her face, and sets off before the sun breaks through the clouds. Your son walks with her halfway, just until the fields start to open and the tree line drops back. You stay behind to tend the animals. The pigs are restless again. One of them limps a swollen leg dragging through the muck. You whisper soothing things as you check it, just a cut, nothing fatal. You clean it as best you can and hope infection doesn't set in. You don't have much to treat it with. Just old honey, a bit of garlic, and the stories you tell yourself about how peasants used to survive worse. Then you move on to the chickens. One hen has disappeared, gone, probably snatched by a fox in the night. You find a smear of feathers near the edge of the field and sigh. There's no use crying over it. That's the world you live in. One moment of carelessness, and something you depend on vanishes. But still, 3 hens left. 3 eggs this morning. Tiny, fragile blessings in a world built from rot. When your son returns, he helps you gather firewood. You both work in silence, each of you chewing the same thoughts. How the land feels too wet. How the trees creak too much. How the weight of winter hasn't left your bones, even though the sky pretends it's spring. By midday, your wife hasn't returned. You don't panic. Not yet. Markets take time. She might have stayed longer to haggle or to wait out another drizzle. Maybe she's just speaking with the other women, trading stories, collecting gossip, seeking news from beyond your little stretch of suffering. But when the sun begins to tip westward, you start to walk the road toward her. Every footstep squelches in the muck. You scan the horizon with eyes that have learned to pick out every figure, every cart, every bird. And finally, after half a mile, you see her shape wrapped in that same shawl, moving slowly. You run to meet her. She's not hurt, but she is crying. Not loudly, just a slow, steady stream of tears down a face gone tighter and paler than usual. She presses the bundle of cloth to her chest, still intact, but shakes her head before you can ask. "Nothing sold," she whispers. "They're all starving, too." You say nothing. You take the bundle from her gently and hold her hand the rest of the way home. That night you eat thin soup and old bread. There's no salt, no oil, nothing new. But the children are warm, the fire still burns, and your wife leans her head on your shoulder while your son hums that same made-up tune. It should be enough. But your mind is already wondering what happens next week when the stores run dry. What happens when the livestock fall ill or the next storm rips the roof entirely off? What happens when even the markets have nothing left to offer? The truth is, peasants don't just fear death. They fear fading, becoming invisible, dying by inches while the world simply forgets you ever existed. No record, no story, no stone. And yet as you lie down that night, you find yourself whispering thanks, not to the Lord, not even to the church, but to the earth itself, to the fire that stayed lit, to the 3 eggs, to the shawl that came back wrapped around a woman you still get to love. You stare at the beams again. Same beams, same cracks, same whisper of wind slipping through. But tonight, your daughter's breathing is calm. Your son is smiling in his sleep. And your wife, though worn, still radiates a kind of strength you can only describe as sacred. Maybe tomorrow the pigs will eat. Maybe they won't. Maybe the fence will fall. Maybe the roof will come down. But not tonight. Tonight you are together. And in this brutal, quiet, crumbling world that alone feels like victory, it's shearing time. You wake before the light does because the sheep won't wait. The breeze outside carries that familiar spring sting wet grass wool and the earthy heaviness of animals who've spent the long winter waiting just like you. They smell like the season itself, and today it's your job to relieve them of what kept them warm. Your son is already up pulling on his tunic, eager in the way only youth can be about chores that you know will leave your back twisted and your fingers raw. He talks about how old Thomas's ram butted him last year, and you both laugh even though you also both remember that the bruise stayed for days. The sheep are docile enough this morning. You suspect they know what's coming, or maybe they're just tired. Everyone is. You fetch the shears still sharp though the handles are wrapped in cloth to keep from biting your palms. You start with the oldest ewe, familiar and steady. Your son holds her, gently whispering to her as you begin the slow, careful work of peeling away the thick, matted fleece. It's a quiet job, intimate. The lanolin coats your hands as you work soft and slick. The wool peels off in long, damp sheets, curled and yellowed at the edges. You try to keep it in one piece, it sells better that way, and your wife's spinning goes easier when the fibers are whole. By midday, you've done 4 sheep and your back is screaming. You take a break beside the trough. Your son hands you a crust of bread and a sliver of goat cheese, and you eat it without words. The sheep bleat softly nearby, their thin bodies looking strangely naked. You wonder if they feel lighter, freer, or if they miss the warmth they once carried on their backs. There's something oddly symbolic about it, stripping away what sustained them all winter. In the same way the land strips you of everything over time. Dignity, teeth, softness. You become leaner, more exposed with each passing year. By evening, the fleece is bundled, tied with twine, and stacked carefully near the cottage. Your wife will wash and card it, fingers red and stinging from the lye and soap root. It'll take days, but she'll hum as she does it, always the same tune, low and soothing. That's the strange thing about peasant life, the rhythm. You'd think the hardship would break you, that it would leave you flailing. But no, it shapes you. It gives every season a song, every hardship a dance, every loss a place in the story. You mark time not by calendars but by chores. The planting, the shearing, the gathering of nettles, the mending of the roof. There's a strange peace in that repetition. The predictability of suffering becomes something almost comforting. At least you know what to expect. And when surprises come, when the sky breaks or the steward raises taxes or someone's child doesn't wake up, you know how to fold the grief into the work. Because you have to. There's no pause button for mourning. You hear it that evening singing. Distant at first, rising up from the far end of the village. The women are gathering in front of the church, weaving garlands for the spring feast, humming old melodies passed down from grandmothers and ghost stories. You remember the words, but don't sing them anymore. Still, your wife and daughter go flowers tucked in their braids, laughing as they leave. You watch them from the doorway, arms crossed over your chest, heart oddly light. Your son stays behind, tending the fire. He adds dried twigs slowly, carefully, like he's learned the value of patience. He glances over at you. "Did you used to dance at the feasts?" he asks. You chuckle. "Once, long ago, did you smile more than the question stings?" You don't know how to answer. So instead, you rise and ruffle his hair. "I'll teach you the steps tomorrow," you say, "if your feet can keep up." He grins. Later, when the women return, the cottage smells of violets and damp grass. Your daughter sings one of the songs softly to herself as she settles into bed. Your wife sits beside you and weaves a tiny garland of twine and dandelions, looping it around your wrist like a bracelet. "Something for luck," she murmurs. You look down at it, ridiculous, bright, soft, and feel your throat tighten. Because you know luck doesn't visit peasants, but love does, and laughter, and music, and warmth. Not often, not in abundance, but enough to remind you that even in the mud and misery, you're still alive. You wear the garland to bed. It falls off in your sleep. You find it in the morning, crushed beneath your elbow petals, wilting. Still beautiful. Still there. And in this life that's something rare enough to treasure. You wake to the sound of boots on gravel. Not yours, not your son's, not anyone in your cottage. These are heavy boots, too clean, too purposeful. You hear them crunching the dirt just outside the door, then pausing. A silence. Then a knock, sharp, impatient. You rise quickly. Your wife is already holding the baby, quieting her breath. Your son stiffens. You open the door slowly and find two of the manor's men standing before you, cloaks dark with dew, their faces unreadable. They say your name and you nod. Then comes the summons. The Lord's eldest son is getting married and the manor requires contributions. They use that word, but you already know what it means. Extra grain, extra wool, extra labor. The wedding of a nobleman is celebration for them and starvation for you. As they list the expected gifts, 2 measures of barley, a goose, and a day of work, to help prepare you, try not to show how hard your heart is thudding. You want to protest. You want to ask what will be left for your children. But your tongue is still. The consequences of saying no are heavier than the burden itself. So you nod. Of course you do. The men turn without thanks and walk off to the next door. You close the door behind you and lean against it for a long moment. Your wife says nothing. She just places a hand on your arm, warm and quiet. That day you measure out the barley yourself. Every handful feels like you're giving away a part of your future. You set aside the smallest goose barely grown, but it's the only one you can spare. The worst part is the silence from your children as they watch. They know. They know this life takes more than it gives. Later you walk to the manor with your offerings. A line of other peasants is already there, clutching sacks and bundles, standing stiffly beneath the watchful eyes of the steward and his men. You recognize faces, neighbors, friends, people who look like reflections of your own worn-out self. When your turn comes, you lay down the barley and the goose. The steward makes a mark on his parchment, not even glancing up. Tomorrow, he says, you'll come to the kitchen yard. Bring your boy. You nod again. No one says thank you. As you walk back through the village, you notice the new banners being hung bright silk in red and gold fluttering from posts. Children from the manor giggle and run with ribbons. You wonder if they even know what it costs to make joy. You and your son rise before dawn the next day. You head to the manor house together. It looms larger than it ever has. You've seen it from afar for years, but standing at its gates, the size hits you. Stone towers, iron hinges, real glass in the windows, a world apart from yours. They assign you to dig trenches for the feast refuse. Your son carries firewood. The cooks bark orders, the steward scolds, the guards watch. It's a circus of chaos preparation for a day you're not even allowed to attend. As you work, you glimpse the noble bride through a high window. Lace veil, golden braid eyes wide like a deer's. She looks young, terrified even. A girl dressed like a queen marrying someone who's never worked a day in his life. And you wonder just for a moment if she's any more free than you are. By nightfall, you and your boy return home with nothing in your pockets but calluses. Your wife tries to smile. She's made soup from the garden's last turnips, and she's roasted wild onions in the hearth. She's done her best to turn famine into flavor. The children eat quietly. You stay up late that night sharpening your sickle. It's a soothing motion. Drag, lift, drag, lift. You've done it so many times that the rhythm has become part of your body. But tonight it feels different, more desperate. Because harvest is coming soon, and everything depends on it. If the crops fail, you starve. If they grow, the Lord takes his share, and you pray there's enough left to live on. You don't dream of surplus, just survival, just a winter without burying anyone. You stare into the blade as it catches the firelight. This tool has fed your family for years. It has also cut your hands, your time, and your joy. You wonder if it will ever be sharp enough to carve out something more than this. But even that thought is a luxury. Because dawn is only hours away and the fields are waiting. So you set the blade down gently, kiss your daughter goodnight, and lie beside your wife on the straw-stuffed mattress, arm draped across her ribs like armor. No words tonight. Just shared breath. Just the soft sound of your son's snore. Just the quiet prayer you whisper silently into the darkness. Let the earth be kind tomorrow. Let it give just a little more than it takes. The fields stretch before you like an open mouth waiting. Harvest time has arrived. This is it, the culmination of every blister, every back-breaking dawn, every whispered prayer for sun, and just enough rain. The soil has done its part, or not, and now your fate rests in how fast and how well you can pull it from the earth. You rise before first light. The air is crisp, laced with mist. Your wife has already packed bread and cheese in cloth, a little flask of weak ale. She kisses your cheek, and you can feel how much that kiss costs her. She's exhausted too from months of mending and tending, but today all hands are needed. She'll harvest just like you, just like the children. There's no dignity in it, no pageantry, just sweat and dirt. Under the nails, and the thrum of muscles grinding through repetition. You take your sickle, the one you sharpened by firelight, and start with the barley. Bend, cut, bind, repeat. The motion becomes automatic, almost meditative. The sun rises behind you and climbs without mercy, burning through your tunic, through your skin. By midday, your hands are raw. Your shoulders scream, but the piles grow. Your wife hums softly beside you as she works the same old tune. Your daughter, still small, gathers lost stalks and tucks them into bundles. Your son, nearly as tall as you, now cuts in long, even strokes. You want to tell him he's doing well, that he moves like someone born to the land, but there's no breath for words, only motion, only work. You pause just once, wiping your brow, and look across the field. Rows of bent bodies, dust rising in halos around each one. It strikes you then, this is your people's glory, not in banners or titles, but in toil, in the brutal act of pulling life from an indifferent earth. The steward arrives late in the afternoon, riding along the edge of the field. He nods, says nothing. Behind him are 2 cartsmen from the manor hopping down to collect the Lord's share. They take a quarter, maybe more. You hand it over, not because you want to, but because it's the way of things. The cost of your roof, your life, your breath. The manor calls it justice. You call it theft. But quietly, you watch your hard-earned grain vanish into sacks stamped with the noble's seal. It feels like watching your soul be portioned out and sent away. You don't say anything. You never do, because even rage requires energy, and tonight all of that is needed just to keep standing. The rest of the day blurs. By sunset, you've filled your cart with what remains. You trudge home, feet dragging, every part of you aching. But there's pride in it too, because what you're carrying is survival. You pass other families along the road, faces as cracked and sunburnt as yours. Children asleep atop piles of straw, women leaning on each other, men limping from overwork. And you nod to each other. That silent peasant greeting, I see you. I know. At home you stack the grain beneath the eaves, cover it carefully with canvas, and sit back. Your wife hands you water. You drink deeply. It tastes like life. The children eat in silence, chewing slowly, eyes half closed from fatigue. Your son slumps against the wall, asleep before the last bite. Your daughter tries to sing, but the tune falls off halfway, and she drifts away, mid-note. You and your wife remain. You look at her across the firelight, this woman who has endured every hunger and every heartbreak beside you. I thought we wouldn't make it, she whispers. You nod. We did. She reaches for your hand. And you sit that way for a while, no talk, just touch, just warmth. There are no feasts for peasants, no bards to tell your story. But in that moment, with your grain safe and your family breathing, you feel rich. And as the fire dims, you lie down, back cracked and shoulders burning, and let sleep pull you under. Because tomorrow the work will begin again, and you'll do it. Because you must. Because you always do. Because to be a medieval peasant means bending, breaking, bleeding, and still returning to the fields again and again. But it also means laughing by candlelight. It means holding your children close. It means survival against all odds. And that somehow is its own kind of triumph. You've made it. You've endured dawns before the frost-cleared storms that crushed fences and flooded hope, the sharp bite of hunger and the heavier bite of silence. You've worked through bone-deep fatigue, watched your children suffer, and still found reasons to laugh around a guttering fire. You've bartered thread, buried hens, and handed over your hard-won grain with clenched fists and lowered eyes. You've survived. And that's the truth at the center of it all. Life as a medieval peasant didn't glow with glory. It pulsed with endurance, with little joys woven into long suffering. You didn't dream of castles, you dreamed of full bellies and winters with no graves. You learned to love through labor, to sing through scarcity. You lived in the margins of history, yet carried the world on your shoulders. And now, as the candle burns low in the corner of your hut, and the straw mattress creaks beneath your tired body, a hush settles over the village. The pigs quiet. The chickens nestle down. The wind sighs its nightly prayer across the roof. You close your eyes. The aches are still there, but they've softened into something like peace. Because for all its cruelty, this world was yours. Your hands built it. And for tonight, that's enough. Sleep comes gently now, like spring rain tapping against your shutters, like the warm breath of your child curled up at your side. Let it take you. You've done enough. You are enough. And tomorrow, well, tomorrow can wait.